Well, good evening. I'm Charles Schultz, and this is the Randomizer. And tonight we're having a discussion about Bluetooth and the birth of the technology, the source of the name, why it was developed, and what it's good for. I think everybody has some sort of Bluetooth device and they understand what it can do. Usually, you use your phone or your computer to connect to wireless headset or a speaker system or something along those lines. But there actually is a lot more you can do with Bluetooth, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, Bluetooth is our turn. All right, so first and foremost, I want to encourage everybody to go to schultzlaboratories.com or universesciencecenter.com, log in, click through to our randomizer page every night, 6 p.m. weeknights. We do a randomizer with a randomly selected technical term, which I'll go into a little discussion and talk about. Mondays at 9 p.m. we have our robotics courses in progress. Please become a member or sign up for those courses. You're going to learn some fascinating things. It's a lot of fun, all about the history and the creation of robotics and how you also can build robotics. We'll show you how to set up your workbench, how to do soldering, how to do a lot of things, and we'll even cover a lot of the points about programming as well. It'll be a lot of fun, and you'll come away knowing a lot more about it. Also, please become a member of Schultz Laboratories and help us support the growth of our virtual learning facility and add new galleries, new content, and new interactive exhibits. Also, if you have some skill or knowledge you wish to pass along to others, you want to become an educator in your own right, contact us and we can set up a virtual gallery or classroom for you to display your works and your techniques. And you can meet people all over the world and teach them what you know. It's a lot of fun also, and it's one of the most satisfying things you can do. Helping people learn is one of the best things we can do in the world today. Well, all of that being said, let's move on to the subject, Bluetooth. So, the name seems a little odd, and it's because it's the name of a 10th century Danish king. So let's talk all about it. What is Bluetooth? And a lot of people don't know that Bluetooth is actually 23 years old now. It was actually originally put into service 7 May of 1998. It is a short-range UHF wideband system for sending packets of data. And by wideband, it means that it uses generally 1 to 2 to 4 megahertz channels, depending on the implementation, typically a megahertz per channel. It runs in the 2.4 gigahertz UHF, or ultra high frequency radio band. So now a lot of devices work in the 2.4 gigahertz channel. And so one of the things about Bluetooth is it's very low power, 2.5 milliwatts, 2.5 thousandths of a watt. And what that means is that it might be a little susceptible to noise, but it has a number of channels. It has many channels it can hop across to get rid of noisy signals if necessary. And B, because of the low power, the range is limited generally to less than 10 meters. Think of it as less than 33 feet if you're inclined to measure things by body parts or English measure. So it is a short-range data transfer protocol. Now, in 2017, they estimated that 3.6 billion Bluetooth devices were already in service. That was 5 years ago. Right now, I don't know if anybody really has a good estimate of how many tens of billions of Bluetooth devices there are, but they're very ubiquitous. They're everywhere. And when you look at it, if you manufacture something like that, so useful and so common, when the numbers in manufacturing go up, the costs generally come down. Many people can buy a small dongle or plug that plugs into the USB of their computer if it doesn't have Bluetooth, which seems unbelievable these days. But you could get them for just over $2 and change. So this is an amazing thing. Now, what if you wanted to build your own Bluetooth device? Could you do that? The answer is absolutely. I do a lot of robotics and other projects, and this is a typical Bluetooth transceiver. So this is the whole thing. This only costs about $3 and change for it, and it's got a bunch of microchips on it. And what it does is it allows you to program your device to act as a Bluetooth transceiver as well. So let's say you have a robotics project, something around your house, or you want to hook it to your alarm system, or you want to do something along those lines. Then if you know anything about programming and you have a little bit of electronic skill, you have the capability of making your own Bluetooth interface. And recognize that every one of these devices has a pre-programmed identity code in every single one that is unique. So you're not going to mix up any two Bluetooth devices. So that's a lot of interesting things to know. Let's get down to some specifics. The name was proposed in 1997 by an Intel employee, and his name was Jim Kardach. And basically, he was working with some friends and had a conversation about a historical novel about Vikings. And in it, he recognized some things about the characters that kind of stimulated his thinking. And this one particular Danish king from the 10th century named Harold Bluetooth stuck out. And what really set it was when they discovered what's known as the rune stone. So runes were basically letters in that language, and they were often inscribed in stone. And the rune for his signature had a very characteristic look. And that set the tone of the project. So they found the rune stone, they found a code name for their project, Bluetooth. And it was one of these things, which, it also made the logo, that stuck in their minds, and the name spread rapidly before they could even do a complete name search. But it was something that stuck in everybody's mind easily. And, having a good trademark and a good name, that's fundamental to any successful product. So now, in 1989, the very first concept of what it should be, literally 9 years before it came to implementation, it was initiated by Nils Rydbeck of, you may remember Ericsson cell phone company in Sweden. Well, Nils Rydbeck was a CTO of Ericsson Mobile, and he also had a fascination about this, and his idea was to make wireless headsets. Now, at the time, every cell phone was connected by wires to every peripheral. And if you wanted to use your cell phone, you had either the option of sticking it up next to your head, or maybe you could get one of those fancy headsets, but now you had a cord running down. So the idea was to eliminate the cords. And the only way to do that is to use a very low power but very short range data transfer protocol of some sort. Well, so he began working on it, and he thought that this would be the great thing to do. They came up with 79 channels for it so that you wouldn't step on anybody else's signal. There would always be a way of routing to your system without getting interference from another. This is a spread spectrum frequency hopping. And by the way, this system can do up to 1,600 channel hops per second. And what that means is it's doing checks every sub-millisecond window to see if the channel it wants to use is available. And it can make 1,600 of those leaps in a second to make sure it finds a clear channel. So if there's interference, it can get around it and retransmit the packet of data on a clear channel and make sure it gets a proper answer or handshake back. So it's a very robust technology. So even though it's low power, it has the ability to get around a lot of interference very readily. And this makes it a very robust technology. And it's really interesting. Adaptive frequency hopping is the technical name for this system. And a lot of people don't know it, but the actress Hedy Lamarr actually came up with the idea of frequency hopping radio. The idea is very simple. There were a lot of things going on where radio communications for security or for secret information was very essential, or for communication and control. And anybody with a little bit of radio expertise could do something malicious, such as turn on a transmitter on your radio channel and broadcast white noise or garbage. Well, that would immediately block the channel and you'd be unable to send or receive your data. So how do you get around that? Well, she was thinking about the fact that certain frequencies seemed to stand out and wondered why you couldn't make a radio that would be smart enough to switch to a different channel so that you'd always be in the clear. You could get around jamming. You couldn't jam all the channels, could you? Well, back in those days, radio broadcasts were the sort of thing that required some pretty sizable hardware. And it would be pretty ridiculous to think that the radio would be able to follow the intelligent signal and jam it all the time. And machines, as you know, are far faster than human beings, particularly in the decision-making department. So she proposed the idea of a radio that would automatically hop to many different channels on the theory that some of those channels would be in the clear and your information would be able to get through. And it was a brilliant idea. And so now we see it implemented in many ways, and Bluetooth has that built right into its software. So this is a fascinating device, not very big, very inexpensive. It's literally in every cell phone in the world at this point, and it's available for other technologies. So how could you put it to use? Let's say you want to do a robotics project, and you want your robot to be able to communicate with a computer, but you don't want to put it on Wi-Fi. Well, you have the option of putting a Bluetooth module in there on your controlling computer and on your robot and establishing a connection. You pair the devices and then you have a clear channel of communication. Now, Bluetooth is a packet radio protocol. And what that really means is it breaks the data up into small packages and sends little bursts over each transmission at a time and gets a handshake back. Now, you'll notice if you use a Bluetooth microphone or headphone, there is a bit of delay between the time that you say something and it ends up coming out the other end. And why is that? Well, it has to do with digitizing the sound sample. Now, when you listen to something over a Bluetooth channel, you don't hear breaks or snips of audio missing. It's because really rapidly, the computer is crunching millions of signals down into a little compressed block and then sending that block and getting a handshake back saying, yeah, thank you, that worked. Think about putting a checksum on each transmission. And when it gets to the other end, if the checksum is good, then you get a signature back saying, hey, that was good. And if you get a bad checksum, it can go to another channel, send again, and get a signature back saying, okay, that one worked. This is a smart, or once again, adaptive technology that allows you to do that. But you'll notice when you speak, the sound has to be digitized, packaged, and sent in a packet. And then at the other end, received, unwrapped, and turned back into a sound wave. So it's amazing how many millions of calculations per second are happening just to make Bluetooth a viable technology. And again, it's fitting in a tiny device much smaller than this in most cases. So that's pretty amazing when you think about how much information and processing we can cram into an incredibly tiny device. And again, 2.5 milliwatts, man, that thing can run on a solar battery forever and you'd never even know that the energy was being consumed. But this also brings up an interesting point. Now, you're not going to be feeding live video at high resolution over a Bluetooth channel, but you could send a picture every few seconds or a few frames per second if it was low res. So many people will build security networks using Bluetooth, or you can buy cameras that have either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth in them. And every so often, it can send a snapshot to you. So now think about it. How many frames per second do you actually need to feel secure? You'd figure a frame every second or two would probably be enough for most home security applications, particularly if it's covering something as large as your yard. So Bluetooth is ideal for this sort of thing because it's going to take somebody longer than a second or two to enter your yard, get across the yard, and reach your front door. So if you stationed a few cameras around your property, each with a Bluetooth module, and then linked them to your computer, you'd have the capacity of sending enough video data to know if something was actually moving out there. And if you're really smart, you'll program your sensors, your cameras, to recognize when something has changed enough to qualify as being motion. So motion sensing can be done with the camera's video signal itself. And how does that work, you may wonder? Well, think about this. Suppose I took a photograph, and then I took another photograph a few seconds later, and I wanted to subtract one from the other. Now, if nothing has changed, then the two frames should match, and there would be little or no difference other than some noise. That's basically the principle behind video motion detection. So if I take a frame every tenth of a second, and I invert the frame and then add it to the other frame, the sum should be 0. And if you go over a certain threshold of change, a certain amount of variation, then obviously something's moving. That's exactly how a motion sensing camera system does its trick. And usually you can program it to single out a small zone in the picture. Only look at this and ignore the rest. Well, that also speeds the process up an awful lot. So stuff like this can be done very easily with Bluetooth. So anyway, I think that everybody now has a little bit better understanding of what Bluetooth is. It is A, broadband, B, UHF, ultra high frequency, 2.4 gigahertz, C, extremely low power and therefore short range, D, frequency hopping with 79 channels to choose from, and E can make 1600 hops per second. That's an awful lot of stuff to cram into a microchip. And I think that overall it really has made our lives a lot better because it's brought instantaneous transfers of data for just about anybody to anything. I can take some pictures with the cell phone and in a few seconds have it downloaded to my email or into my computer. So that's a pretty snazzy trick for such a tiny device. So if anybody has any questions about Bluetooth technology, the floor is open. And meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and urge you to go to universesciencecenter.com or schultzlaboratories.com and check in with us. Become a member, support the growth of our galleries and the addition of new exhibits and interactive content. Also, join us every 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Randomizer, where we discuss a random technical term every weekday, and 9 p.m. Mondays, sorry about that, for our robotics classes. It's a lot of fun, it's very entertaining and very informative. So at that, I don't see any incoming questions or comments. And I'm going to read my quote for the day. So the quote for the day, the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. And that's Psalm 24:1. Pretty broad statement, I'd say, and very inspiring. And, in a sense, we realize that God owns the world, but evil seems to be controlling it right now. I'm sure that's going to change very rapidly. Don't lose faith. Well, everybody, it's been a fascinating talk, and I hope you've learned something. And I will call on this group to attend tomorrow, if you will. And please join us live. We have the opportunity to see and hear what you have to say. Bring your questions, comments, and ideas to us 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every weekday on the Randomizer. Well, thank you for showing up. I really enjoy giving these talks, and I hope you enjoy them as much. Looking at the view numbers, it seems like a lot of people do like the show. That's very encouraging. Well, make the world a better place. I'm Charles Schultz of the Randomizer, and thank you for watching.